Hi everyone. So hello and welcome to this formations event. This is me and Tom Lockwood-Moran and Shivanee Ramlochan on screen there, you can see. Welcome to this formations event, a series of public events focused on global inequalities, which is led by Jenny Ramone for Nottingham-Trent University's Postcolonial Studies Centre in collaboration with Nottingham's Bonington Gallery. We hope you'll join them for events shared throughout the year. You can watch last year's and this year's events on the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the Bonington Gallery Formations YouTube channel. This February and this event, we're focusing on love. So tonight, we'll be discussing queer love, literary love, Caribbean love, and the anti-colonial force that is queer Caribbean love during this special reading and in conversation event with poet Shivanee Ramlochan and PhD literary researcher, who's me. It's weird when you get to introduce, when you do the introduce yourself. There's me, Tom Lockwood-Moran. I think there's Thomas on quite a lot of stuff, but I feel like we're friends already, so we'll go with Tom. There's some kind of background information for you guys that I'll introduce Shivani, I'll introduce myself, and then we have a slight situation happening in the background for you to be aware of, but we'll let you know. It'll all become part of it. So Shivanee Ramlochan, whose pronouns are she, her, is an Indo-Trinidadian poet, critic, and essayist whose first collection, Everyone Knows I'm a Haunting, was shortlisted for the 2018 Forward Prize. Ramlochan's second text, Unkillable, is forthcoming with Noemi Press. Ramlochan is the book reviews editor for Caribbean Beat magazine and works closely with BOCAS Literary Festival, the Caribbean's largest literary festival. You can subscribe to her newsletter Substack via the link, which will go in the chat, as well as her Twitter, Instagram, all the things. Be in touch. Me, Thomas Lockwood-Moran, or I wrote Thomas in my bio. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. I'm a PhD literary researcher funded by Midlands 4 Cities, writing my thesis in English literature entitled Queer Resistances, Contemporary Caribbean Communality, working title. Thomas's project is supervised by experts from Nottingham-Trent University and the University of Leicester. I'm currently hourly paid lecturing in postcolonial text at NTU within English culture and media. My Twitter will also go there. For my sins, you can follow me. I'm not very good. Shivanee's very good. You should follow. This event will last about an hour and a half, hopefully, but I'll get to that in a minute. With the time up to the first hour dedicated to Shivanee's reading, followed by discussions with myself. After this segment, there'll be an allotted time for discussion, questions and answers with our audience at the end. So the Q&A will be in the form of questions that you write in the YouTube chat, moderated and sent over to Shivanee and myself. Please be aware that a code of conduct is in place and can be read through the link in the chat at the moment. This was also sent with your links in the event. All appropriate engagement is really welcome, warmly welcome. We'll both be very happy to talk to you. But please be mindful that boundaries are in place for all participants and audience members' safety and well-being. We're really delighted you can join us tonight and extend warm, belated Valentine's wishes. At least said Valentine. So maybe it's Valentine's. Valentine's wishes to all you queer lovers and allied others out there, which makes me sound a bit like a radio presenter. Please note that tonight's event includes live automated closed captioning generated via Teams, and that this may include some mistakes. So to our kind of just a warning for tonight. So just before we came online with you now, Shivanee, the entirety of Trinidad is in a nationwide power outage. So Shivanee has very, very successfully joined us, actually, Shivanee, thank you, in kind of the best possible way. So we're on Shivanee's data and hopefully battery life will last. But yeah, welcome, Shivanee. Stressful, but...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to Trinidadian sun behind me, which is providing the only lighting that we currently have. I am really glad to be here with all of you in these very queer and very power deficient circumstances. So thanks to a combination of mobile data, hopefully persevering phone battery life, and of course, the brilliant efforts and organization of Tom and his team and everyone at Bonington Gallery, I am delighted to be here. I am delighted to be queer, and I'm really happy to see you. As long as our phone of my phone life will give us, which I hope is the full hour and a half.
Yeah, I hope so. I feel like it's on our side at the minute. I also feel like I don't want to say that too much in case we jinx ourselves. But it's so good to have you here, and it's really nice to kind of be able to have this space with everybody kind of out there. This is also kind of a queer space in its way, with us here. Everybody's out there somewhere. We're all connected in some sort of way here, and everybody is very, very warmly welcome to this kind of treat with you, in which we'll be discussing love. So love is the overarching theme. Love. How do we feel in terms of love at the moment? It must be quite difficult, Shivani. Perhaps maybe you'd be feeling quite hot. There's a hotness to love, I suppose.
Atmospherically, yeah, it's like quite heated.
Yeah.
From the entire power crisis that is going to be with us for the session. But writing about love never felt like explicitly one of my intentions. With everyone knows I'm a haunting, and certainly with the poems that have followed. But what I've learned is that love, particularly queer love, and a non-heteronormative desire, has been embedded in the spines of these poems, despite any of my intentions. It's kind of like the work reveals itself to you after it's done. And only after it's done can you see certain things that are true in it. And so what I came to understand was true about these poems is that they have always been emissaries of a certain kind of love. I think in particular, the sort of love that growing up, I never thought I would see an easy or a comfortable or a legal expression of in my islands, in my frame of reference. So I think it's true that even if you think you're not worthy of love within your communities, there is a certain way in which the work can give you hope and sanctuary and all the things that are supposed to be very trite but are actually sustaining instead.
Absolutely, yeah. And I wondered, when you were talking about kind of that unworthiness, or not, that nobody is unworthy in whatever way, how that fits into kind of writing as well, or writing communities, for lack of maybe a better term. But have you felt did you feel, I suppose, with your poetics, and as we'll come on to quite quickly, we're going to go so I don't bang on for too long, because I will bang on. There'll be Shivani will go right into readings, which is going to be great. But I was thinking around that your poetic voice always feels very singular and queer, but also distinctly Caribbean in terms of Trinidad. And I wondered how you kind of navigate those in literary terms when it comes to kind of out of placeness or worthiness. Have you felt worthy?
Longest standing arguments I've made have always been with myself. And that's definitely true of the work that I produce. I certainly felt as a teenager writing the very first set of queer poems, which of course I didn't have the language to understand, were queer poems. They just felt like things I needed to write. And if at any point anyone hears background noise, it's because my windows are open. So you'll hear the sounds of the Trinidadian street. I felt that at least on the page, I needed to write a way of belonging for myself. And this was at a time when I was very unaware of who my queer Caribbean progenitors might be, or that there was really any kind of ancestry for me in this genre. Queer writing distinctly felt like something that was happening outside of me, outside of my lived experience or understanding. Of course, when I read more and came to know more, and then slowly started to become a part of that community, it was just astonishing and miraculous to realize that I could fit in that space without needing to make any apology for it. I mean, some of the relationships I have with Caribbean writers are deeply humbling for so many reasons, but also because they are truly a sort of intentional family that I've been lucky enough to build for myself and for them. What we give each other is, it's difficult to put into words, but it does feel a lot like a homecoming. And it's not that we all write about the exact same experiences of being LGBTQI plus in this space, because that would be impossible. But it's a generous and enthusiastic permission to do that with each other and for each other, knowing that in that space there's freedom and there's enthusiasm, even if the world outside that space is still challenging. So particularly, I think, for those of us who live in and work in Caribbean space. But what I think and what I hope we are able to create, and I'm thinking very specifically of writers like Rajiv Mohibir, Andrew Bagu, Rosamund S. King, writers with whom I'm profoundly glad to be in community, is that we can engender self-worth for all of us. And that when invariably there are moments of crippling doubt, we can draw on that well by saying, my poetics might feel really in peril right now, but I can turn to Andrew's work as a way to signify myself, or Rajiv's, and then I feel that it is all worthwhile.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, but also I think that element of kind of chosen families or chosen families within communities and friends, I've never really thought about that before in terms of the literary lens. You know, you can, as much as for these people, you can find that community with them, you can also find it when they're not there in their work, in their writing. And that's something that I found really special at the minute, writing with, like, kind of, you know, critically writing about your work, has been that sense of not aloneness, that that connection over however many thousands of miles, however long, and however far, that doesn't really matter, because that connection is really about hearing your voice and really wanting to hear your voice. And it's really amazing to hear that you kind of, I'm sure that's a feeling that's shared for a lot of people in literary ways, but I suppose I hadn't thought about it in that way before. Yeah, so thank you. I think, so if we move into our first reading from you, if that would be okay, Shivani.
Yeah.
Great. So I think it should go up on the screen as well.
So this first poem is from Everyone Knows I'm a Haunting. And it's actually the conclusion of the poems that are explicitly about abortionists. So it's the final poem in that movement of poems, which I began writing very early on. And I think they were a way to write about love, certainly, and also about what to do with complicated and painful love, and what comes of lovers in truly desperate and difficult situations. I was trying very much to explore the idea of whether or not love can be enough, can sustain us, and can keep us as safe as possible in really agonizing times. So this poem from that movement is called Fire, Fire. Outside the tent, it is very cold. I am from islands. I think he doesn't know what my skin can endure. But I see I have misjudged him. Inside the tent, I am bivouacked by poems. He is no great orator, but they keep me warm. Who told you these tales? I ask him, as he whispers, fire, fire on my breastbone. I show him where the war took most of me. we agree the whole can never be filled. When he does not pretend that we can transplant a sapling in the space where my family died, then I begin to love him. Fire, fire, he soothes into my brow. His grandmother was the one to feed him these poems, and to keep my red skin warm, he shares her battle stories. He tells me about the canyons beneath her beaded blouses. He recites her own poems about the times she was held down. Oh, fire, fire sets the leather shell of our tent alight. The truth is too hot to hold, and all I want is to be burned. It gets so cold that the rivers forget how to dream in thaw tongues. It gets so cold. The ice grows everywhere except on his grandmother's poems. Giving me her language, he keeps none for himself. I love him, and now I must watch him freeze to death. Fire, fire. I try to skitter across his blue cheeks, but those wedding vows do not dissolve in my spit. Some poems are not transferable. This heat, this love is a terrible gift.
Thank you. Thank you,
You're
Shivani.
welcome.
That was really beautiful. And yeah, I think maybe the reason why I was rambling on a bit earlier about heat and trying to make a connection with the heat that was happening with you with that is because I was already thinking about this poem in terms of fire and like the fiery burning passions, but also the ways in which kind of love necessitates a certain hurt, but also that maybe in terms of queerness or queer loving desires that are very open, I suppose, when we're talking about LGBT plus, when we're not always talking about queerness, but they are always maybe particularly involved in some way. But for these, was this your kind of I think you mentioned it when I was talking to you before this. This is one of your oldest poems that you can remember, and it feels there's a burning passion to it that is also quite delicate in its way. I mean, I don't know if that's weird to say, but how do you kind of see the connection between like the fire and the love elements of this poem working through?
You know, Tom, I think it's really lovely that this is one of the poems you were interested in us sharing today because it is so old. I think I often forget a lot of the intensity that I felt around writing it when I was much younger. And, you know, it can appear, it's certainly one of those poems in the book that can appear to be very straight coded. Like the people tend to interpret the narrator as female and the subject of the poem, the husband, as male. And, you know, it took me a very long time to realize that I could write about anything and still be queer. Like, if I wrote about a sunset, it would be gay. Or like, or a market, that would be gay too. Or like a closet, unpunctured, and that would be a queer production. And so I think queer agencies, and this is before I could acknowledge this to myself, is when this poem was written. I was a teenager. Moving through all of these poems and really, in ways that are really interesting and revelatory for me to look back on now. There's nothing I would do differently, I think, if I had a chance to redo this poem. I think it needs to express that state between desperation and desire, and also really ask hard questions about what do we do when we come to the limits of our love, when our love is trying to make us survive in really inhospitable territory, whether it's climate-based or rooted in fear. What happens to us, particularly, I think, within the queer community, when the family we choose is often our only family? What happens when we don't have external family to rely on? Where can we go? Who can we turn to? And what do we do when the one that we choose, or the ones we choose, or the ones we love, when we can't protect them or be protected by them? Can love fill those spaces? And I think the conclusion that this poem comes to is that they can, and that they do, and they will, but not without some cost.
Yeah, some taking. I think that hole that can never be filled, I found that quite stirring in terms of talking to your love and talking about the family that died. Because in order, I suppose, when we talk about chosen families in whatever capacity and whatever type of queer community, there's not the imagining that something has to leave, that there has to be that kind of loss attached to it. And I think particularly in this poem, that burning, the want for the truth is too hot to hold, and all I want is to be burned. I suppose this, what I see here, and what also kind of comes through a lot of your writing, as we'll see, and as I've been interpreting it anyway, is a desire to just tell the truth, your truth, and that's a revolutionary act. That's an act of resistance, because your truth cuts through. Maybe it sets on fire quite a lot of different conventions, And I think, you were saying that like you wouldn't go back and change anything, and I think you absolutely shouldn't. Like it's one of those. But I wondered what you thought about kind of the transferability of the poet. Like sometimes when I was reading this poem, it's kind of like the poem also embodies kind of queer love in some ways as well, and isn't interchangeable, because no poem is interchangeable, no version of love is interchangeable. And I wondered if that was something that you were thinking about, or that kind of impacted on it, or is it something that I might just be putting on there?
I feel like, when I've thought about this in the past and tried to identify which poems are the most queer poems in the collection, I've often kind of come into this wondering. And then it goes back to what we're talking about finding yourself worthy and gauging your output, I think, as a queer poet in those terms. Like, how much of a percentage of love is there across all poems, or agency or desire? And it took a long time for me to think of Everyone Knows I'm a Haunting as a cohesive sort of narrative, as a kind of like a living diary that you put on display, in a way that's not really autobiographical, but can be for some parts of your life. And of course, the challenge is when readers sort of assume that everything in your poems happened to you wholesale. And I think where that's relevant, what we're talking about today, is that when it's your queer community who specifically want to know about expressions of love or desire or fear or abuse even in the poems, I do feel a certain kind of indebtedness in a different way to be of account to them that I don't always do in other circumstances. And one question I've gotten quite a bit from queer readers in the Caribbean is whether or not I feel more hopeful about things now since the book has been in the world. And a lot of things have happened for us as a regional community since this book was published in 2017. the first set of laws were put in place to decriminalize and repeal very old and antiquated sodomy laws in Trinidad. And the world of the poems that existed. In that space, I never could have imagined those laws would be repealed. And so the book is very much a product of my poetics up to a certain point. And I think what is transferred, what I hope is transferred between poems like this one, poems like the ones we're going to read next, is a really defiant hopefulness. Because even if I couldn't imagine our laws would change, that we could begin to feel more legal on our own country and our own soil, I think my poems always hoped for that. Which is to say, I think my poems are more optimistic than I am, in the ways in which they sort of lean towards hope and an idea of intractable goodness, which is so difficult to believe in, whether you're queer or not queer or as yet to be decided. So I hope that I think I'm always hoping my poems will make me a better person, and I truly think that's a part of the equation.
No, I don't think so. I think you're great already. So, but but that's neither here nor there. And I'm not just kissing you. Like, I'm not just being up on you. But I really like that part that you're saying about kind of, you were saying that you hope that you think that the poems are more hopeful than you are. The way I said it and thinking through that was, I think they're as queer as you are, and within that there is a certain hopefulness. You know, all those almost those kind of queer theory things that are almost cliche now in terms of horizons, looking towards horizons, but they're all completely true. You know, they're all completely. So you've written even pre or beyond. You've written that sense of a futurity. Not just a future, you know, a future that is to come, hopefully will come, might come. And then I suppose you're seeing some sort of shift in terms of legal sanctioning or desanctioning. But what does that mean? Because I suppose there has to be, the public and societal consciousness shift, but more on a global sense, because I'm never attempting in any way, shape or form to say that that it's more anything in the Caribbean, because it's not. The danger to threat to life is perhaps more, but it does still happen in the global north. But the culture is still there. Just because someone won't, you still can't speak the truth. I feel like you still couldn't speak the truth here, but obviously you're dealing with so much more kind of direct daily in that way.
I feel that kind of very much leads us into the next poem, which is, and perhaps in the interest of battery life, just to make sure we get room for all of this to get in, I might read just a second one from those two.
Okay.
Which is last poem in the book, which is called Vivek Chooses His Husbands. So the thing about Vivek is that these poems were among the last to be added to the collection. And specifically, I was really striving towards what a good final poem would be. And I felt like I didn't have one. I felt like I didn't know how to end a work that had sort of taken up 10 years of my life. Of not, admittedly not very procedural planning. A lot of these poems just feel like they happened of their own volition. But still, I was shaping this manuscript with Jeremy Pointing, who's my editor at People Tree Press. And I think we both felt there was a need for the end of the book to say something, which would have been a declaration of, I think, declaring my poetics on multiple fronts, one of which is queer. So Vivek is someone people who spend time with Haunting will meet in the last two poems of the book. And for a long time, I think quite a few readers were really fascinated by him, and they would come up to me and ask me after readings, "Who is this Vivek? Who's he? Where did he come from? Is he a real person? How do you know him? He's so audacious and bold, and kind of does the things and says the things that people may very much want to do and say in their secret hearts, but don't allow themselves to do." And I never really had a ready answer in the early days of the book just being out. But now I think, having lived the poems quite a bit since then, I used to say that Vivek would have been me if I were born into a conventionally cis male coded body and existed a certain way as an Indo-Caribbean male in Trinidad. But now I think that may well be true, but Vivek has always been a part of me, and that I didn't need to be born cisgendered male to realize. It's that ultimate nexus of pure unfuckwithability. This idea that the world is going to do whatever it wants to me. But within that, I have agency. Within that, what I do with my body is worthy. Who I love is worthy. No one can take that from me. That's that part of me that I wish I could always feel. And I think everyone has some version of that they wish they were that concentration of themselves all the time, sometimes. So that's who Vivek is. And I think that's all you need to know before I read this poem. And yeah, I'm, and I really want to say that for all that Vivek is not me 100%, I'm not him 100%, I'm very proud of him. As if he were real and like sitting next to me, drinking rum. Because he is someone I truly believe has survived. Despite the worst things that we can do to each other as human beings. And I'm proud of him as if he were real. Vivek chooses his husbands. Your father said not to take faggots to your bed, so you call them festivals. Corpus Christi gave his body up between bites of bread, leavened a Sunday on your tongue so hot that you chase the burn with olive oil, sprung from some garden where other men have fallen to their knees. You knifed the best sounds of him clean with Eucharist butter, blessed the back and the sides of his body, going over catechism scars with tongue point, cock heavy and poised for betrayal. You splinter the colors of pagua in your bed. You let him a beer bleed your sheets. Consummation morning, a slit throat red. Powder on your lashes. Red powder on your nose bridge. Joy, soft, as if you were sucking that nectar from the cunt of an improbable other. Small suitors of red lining the backs of his knees. You cling to the backs of his knees and let the tempo peal bells of bright orgasm over you. Samain you found in an avarice with diphthong, and when he asked you, what island does your voice come from, handsome? You showed him mouth first, worked glottals over his girth, tasted his grandfather's name in your soft palate for weeks after, the ancestry of him roving in your spit, routing you with fire, cleaning you for the virgin kill. The day you marry Hanukkah is a Glock pointed to your father's face. You tell him, I am the queen. the comeuppance, the hard heretic that nature intended.
Wow. I mean, thank you. It doesn't seem enough because, like, God, that's just so good, Shivani. But also, like, I would clap. I could clap. Other people would be clapping at home, but it's always weird if there's just one of you and you clap. But I've clapped. Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's amazing that you were talking about Vivek there as kind of that person, that poetic persona that you're proud of, or that you're. Do you see them? Obviously, they're part of you, but do you see them as a friend character? Obviously, they're the kind of person that you want to be friends with. How did you find, with kind of gaining that voice, a sense of loving the character or the poetic character? Did you have that straight away, or did you? Because some of the people, or some of the most fabulous, amazing gay men that I've ever met have been people that I really didn't like to begin with. You know what I mean? Because I thought they were too fabulous, and maybe maybe I was like, oh, maybe I was intimidated. So I wondered whether that love of kind of Vivek was there straight away, or you loved his background, or how did that voice come through, I guess?
I think because Vivek is a part of me, there was no way I could love him completely. Like, there were always these warring states of self-doubt and fear and uncertainty, which one gets quite a bit of that from the poem that precedes this one, in which Vivek is doing a sort of confessional of his realization of his queerness. And yet it's always this poem that I turn to the most public readings, certainly, because I feel it is, if it's Vivek's manifesto of himself as an act of survival from the clutches of a really sort of oppressive father figure, then I wanted that to be incredibly true for the way in which the book ends, because it would have been almost easier to end with despair. Like, despair is a territory I know very well as a person, as a queer person, as a Indo-Caribbean woman, as any of my incarnations. And many of my poems do not flinch from, I think, what is worst and darkest about all of us. But that tendency towards hope. If Vivek, who's so potently himself, without apology, could sort of stand in his agency and say, listen, I know that this is what it costs. It might cost me everything in the traditional family sense. But what I gain is a true way to be myself in the world. That's the part of him that I really love. And I think if I could have learned to love that about him, it's kind of retroactively made it okay to accept that about me. Because really, Tom, I used to think I could only be a full representation of Vivek if I were male coded, if I were born with the genitals that people say make you a man, and had a traditional male experience. And I think in my head, what I didn't realize I was doing until sometime after was conflating the idea that if you were born male, you're born with a certain level of power. And that might be true. That might be true. It is true oftentimes, and really letting music pass by in the street, in really conventional sort of societies. And I grew up in a world that was at once very permissive and also very conventional in other ways. So I've seen exactly what being born into cisgender male power looks like. But I also know it's also not always that simple. I can't just say, I couldn't just say, oh, if I were born a man, my life would have been easier. My life would have been maybe easier in some ways, but I would have still been me, I think, and still deeply conflicted, still very closeted. as a young person, not even knowing what a closet was, but knowing that there is a part of you that knows that you are not conforming to what someone's expectation of happiness is, because you're not happy. I had a very happy childhood. I was a profoundly happy person in many ways, but it's that a part of you that is truly subterranean, which is where Vivek lives. That, and everyone has it. You do. Everyone, that part of themselves with whom you're always in constant yearning and striving and grappling. So, all that to say that I've learned to love Vivek fully. There were times that I didn't trust him. And I think it was because I didn't trust a lot of myself for a long time.
And then, but it feels like maybe in the writing of him, there's like a birthing of him. It's seeing sometimes what is inside you, you have to see outside of you in order to know that it's there, to know that it's real, that you were right. Yes, I think that. Thank you so much for reading that. That was amazing. That was beautiful. I'm conscious of time. My earpod nearly fell out. I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious of time. So, well, if it's okay, should we move towards which Hindu? Because I know we've had some questions come through. But would that be good for you to move on to Hindu?
Yeah, would have been fantastic. I don't think I can view it in my current.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well. It's completely up to you, because I suppose we have gone up with, which is natural. You always going to go a bit over some time on these. So, yeah,
I'm still
happy
to. If anyone has questions about it, I'd be very happy to answer them. But unfortunately, you can all blame Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. I will post their address for you to write letters and complain. But it would be really difficult to try and see it on the screen, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, it will be in the chat. The link for it can be in the chat anyway, and people can have a look at that, and then they can ask questions. Because there's that witch Hindu. There's a lot to unpack in that in terms of witch and love. But people can bring that to us if they want to. But just to kind of, if we've got a little bit more time with this Vivek poem, the idea of kind of that first line. And maybe it's because it's the last poem, and I love a last poem or a last page with a really good first line. Your father said not to take faggots to your bed, so you called them festivals. There is something really a joyful, illicit. Oh no, we might. Oh, we got you back. Yay! Oh, that was good. It's close.
Try to be nosy and look at the chat. I did that, and then it took me away. A question come in, but I'm going to leave that all to you.
Okay,
Not
I'll let you know if there's something I can. Yeah, that's difficult, isn't it? Oh god. Sorry, Trinidad. We've got even more to write in the letter. Right, angry letter. So much more to write in the angry letter. To Trinidad, electric boards. But yeah, that's a kind of reframing of faggot and taking them to festival. I mean, even when I use the word faggot, people get mad at me. I mean, and I'm like, I've had it chucked at me all the time, all the fucking time. So it's my word, and it gets to be my word because I say it is. So, and I think it is yours as well, definitely, because Vivek lives inside you, and I guess framing it as festivals. I was thinking a lot about that kind of that sexual ambiguity, that sexual transgression that happens around kind of holy festivals or carnival in whatever way, and kind of the way you reframe faggotry more so, like kind of hardcore, like real gay sex or real lesbian sex, like the real stuff with other men into making it kind of fun, and the way that festivals kind of denote that it gives you that joy of love and sex back, taking them to bed. And I wondered if you were thinking about any of that when you wrote it, or if it kind of came out. I know you talked a lot about kind of your poet being a lot of compulsion or compelled to write. Did you feel compelled to kind of reframe faggots to festivals?
Yeah. Yes, I think you put it beautifully. I really wanted to celebrate what is innate to our desire and sexuality and sensuality, because a lot of people who are queer critical or queer hating. Think of a gay person as just a state of perverse sexual organs. That's all they are to them. Someone who is confounding their biological nature by using their parts in the wrong way. And that, that would be deeply disappointing on its own as an understanding of who a person is. Because I don't think a straight person is their anatomy. But apart from that, it's so ungenerous of any human mind to conceive of a person in only those terms. And a lot of what I hope to do in my work is explore how we are fully human all the time, whether we are in bed with someone, whether we never go to bed with someone, like a cloistered nun living now or living then.
Queerest thing.
13th century France could still very much, still 100% a lesbian if she never put her lips on another woman's vagina. I mean, it has nothing to do. It can have everything to do with it. It can also have nothing to do with it, and both are perfectly fine if that's a person's autonomous choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Or asexual. I mean, there's a lot of asexual nuns, I assume.
Yeah, and festivals are important to Trinidad and to a lot of Caribbean societies. I mean, Trinidad in particular is multicultural, has had been settled and discovered and arrived at by many different people, including the indentured laborers from whom I'm descended, from the Indian subcontinent. And we have a profound mixing of beliefs and faiths that are certainly not always harmonious, but which are very true to our understanding of ourselves as a people. And I felt that any gay man, which Vivek is, living and loving on this island, is no less a Trinidadian man, is no less a person who, if he loved festivals to begin with, doesn't love them less because he's gay. I mean, even saying it sounds perversely stupid, but you know what? I try to leave a lot of space in me to understand that the equations in people's minds that make them hateful also make them fearful. I try to keep that in mind. People are coming from a place of extreme hate. It means extreme hate in some form has been levied onto them, and they are carrying out this really awful cosmic burden. So there's that, and that does help. But the poem needed to be celebratory. It needed to be unapologetic.
It is. And it's all of the above and more. But also just thinking about it as we were talking about faggots, and then obviously we were talking about kind of the imposition of the discovering of any form of Caribbean space, that word itself will, of course, through English, be its own colonial import, and the object that it denotes of kind of kindling fire. People know the etymology of that word, of kind of interestingly enough, kind of fire. Now we've got faggots. There's this thread that's also going through the poems that we've selected coming into this. More so than maybe, I mean, we've had discussions, and I think there's that thread that's there, that's also kind of a resistant thread that's kind of taken the same vein each time. And that's something that, moving on to the next poem, which is in response to, in fact, Shivani, you'll probably be better at doing the response to the you've got that book, haven't you? So you do. Oh yeah, oh good. And there'll be a link to buy. I'm going to buy it. If everyone buy it, but also I want to buy it first.
So this is new work that was written in 2020, so sometime after Haunting. It was commissioned by the brilliant artist and curator Andal Gosine, who's Trinidadian, based in Canada. And Andal introduced me to the work of another Trinidadian visual artist named Wendy Nanan, who's made her artistic practice here in Trinidad for a long time. And Wendy, in 1984, so before I was born, created a suite of papier-mâché and oil sculptures. They're called persona, which I believe they'll be shown on screen for you to see. And in Wendy's profoundly moving artistic statement on these pieces, she said they represent the phases of her life, both as a young person growing up in Trinidad, someone who emigrated for a time and also returned. And I was invited by Ando to write work in response to these images, well, these persona, because the more time I spent looking at them, the more they felt like real beings who are imbued with not just Wendy's life history, but the movements of people who've existed in a liminal sort of questioning space for a long time. And the detail to which I was most drawn in persona is the figure of a schoolgirl. So in that image, the one Wendy has created, she's very identifiably garbed in one of the well-known secondary school outfits of one of our best-known secondary schools. Not the one I went to, but one in close proximity to the school I attended, which was St. Joseph's Convent in Port of Spain, which, according to the very codified sort of educational lens through which we view things, was considered to be very prestigious. I've sort of wrestled with ideas of prestige and what makes a school prestigious, but that is a debate for a whole other time. Poem to which that particular image is dedicated is called Convent, and it is 100% about lesbians. Convent. Sugar, meet me under the blue staircase in the shape of a lover. I think there might be nuns buried right here. Don't be afraid. Don't let your white socked foot falter on this old step. Look down, and you'll see the head of a virgin split apart like something holy. See the blood. See it slick like oil. Watch it drip into the mouth of a halo. Oh, 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 oh. Sweetheart, we're already illegal before we found our way onto blue-lined paper. Tell me, between the rows of sweat-polished pews, you can see the face of a lover. Won't you meet me in the sacristy, where we can lay side by side, hands barely touch me with your other holy hands. And we can fantasize about the girls who lie in bed with other girls, barely touching. The bells call so brightly in our eyes that they sound like heaven. Is it heaven, sweet girl? Or is it something we only know in the dark? Girl, I learn what to call you when our parents are happy and when all the nuns are at choir. I learn what to call you in the secret spine of the church graveyard amidst the skeletal horrors. I know what to say now when your heart is racing from netball practice, when my fingers find their way under your pleated skirts, when the class ring catches in the corner of your mouth, And it's all blood and prayers and history class all the way home. And the wanting is relentless, like the Greek courses in textbooks that will do neither of us any good, that will be as useless as porn. Listen, if you wait for me, I'll wait for you. Can you be good? Sweet girl, can you be good? We've only got 2 years, 10 months, and 10,000 laws to go.
Like delicious, like really delicious as as a poem. Like it's the way I think there's this, because there's this kind of recurring sweetness, sugarness, and I'm not a sweet tooth kind of person. It's really it's yeah. There's so much of kind of like, because I hadn't seen this, but I will be buying the book, but I hadn't seen this poem before, and I think even when I opened it on the page, it made me like the form. There's something really special in terms of like what it reminded me on the one side is kind of like church pews, and then what it reminded me on the other side is like hymn writing or a litany specifically, I guess, that like back and forth of Catholicism. And I wondered, in terms of that kind of this very lesbian, loving, beautiful kind of and illicit and illegal and in the context of Trinidad loving, how do you and illicit and illegal and so many kind of different Catholic levels, and I suppose sticking with Catholic, like how did you find that functioned, kind of creating these two lovers with all of that weight behind them, I suppose?
I think that's a brilliant question. I had a really good time at Convent. It was one of those, which people please don't think I'm just talking about lesbianism. Oh my god, what a way it sounds. But no, I meant like as a holistic experience. It was one of those defining periods of my life. But/and I was also intensely aware of how I was an othered being in that space, which often felt sacred, in which I often felt profane, because one respects a space and finds it attractive, finds it nurturing and powerful. And then one also feels, am I defiling this space just being in my skin? But I think what I came to realize, particularly as I became a much older student, is that there were many expressions of girls who were profoundly queer, who were deeply unhappy in their closeted states, who perhaps were fully accepting themselves, but still knew they had to exist in a certain way within these formations. And within that, there were young women who loved each other desperately. Was it always carnal love? Certainly not, though of course it was as well. And that would have been strictly forbidden, as you would imagine. But also, there were relationships that were characterized by the most beautiful and intense intimacy without touch. The state in which lovers found themselves either unwilling or not ready to be physical together, whether out of fear or shame or just not being ready, for their own reasons. But that desire of love and the desire to be in love and the knowledge that you were in love, but not touching, but not kissing, not embracing, ran very parallel to the intensity of feeling being taught about God, about Christ and the cross and his followers, and the excessive, extreme passion of liturgy. I mean, the word passion is integral to the Roman Catholic faith. I think for a particular reason, because one is called to be one's highest self before God, which I think is true in almost any religious variant you can encounter. And so it was very easy to to find these intensities married. And while I am not a practicing Catholic, I feel that in a lot of ways, if one was a young woman who loved women, a lot of the ways in which love is expressed in a Christian sense would make sense. You know, if we stripped away all of the hateful pedagogy around it, just examined love for what it is, for what it hopes to do. They're really not that far off the mark from each other.
100%. I completely agree with that. I think it's interesting. I don't know whether it was in our last conversation meeting or the one before, but we did talk about Jesus on the crucifix, and that being that for some, there is definitely an element of kind of sexual awakening that can be found in the church through those images that are there is sexualized. I think you think of kind of monks making them, perhaps, but also, I suppose, I was quite drawn towards this idea of religious love as a form of queer love, because I was thinking about the ways in which, kind of in Catholic sense, like the love for the Virgin Mary for women, that you could be seen as, and the love for Jesus as a male. And obviously this is very, very contentious, and I probably shouldn't even say it, but it's true. Like, it's true, isn't it? Because you're taught, like as you were saying, you're taught to love Jesus, God, and for many men, I suppose that could be their outlet, or their way of sanctioning our form. Somehow there's a dissonance, isn't there? It's like man, male loving off the cards, but I love Jesus, and that love is never. It's always more than like a familial love. It feels, anyway, from an outsider point of view.
It's incredible we're talking about this, because I think today, before power left all of Trinidad, and it still hasn't come back, by the way. I saw a headline, I think, that said someone within the Roman Catholic Church was reporting that gay sex within the Vatican is at an all-time high, like within the Roman Catholic Church. And I'm like, why do you think that is? Like, you have highly intelligent, highly motivated, passionate, cisgender male men in community with each other, and in the most intimate of terms. And so much of the expression of that spiritual desire tends towards an adoration, like a legit adoration of the male Christ-like body. How do you not see that this is a very natural progression of things? This is actually perfectly in line with someone who loves the Lord, wants to revere the Lord, also wants to live as their authentic self. And it is truly painful to know that these men are at terrible odds with themselves and are prone to all kinds of self-hatred because they are religious beings who are taught they are out of their order, in disorder, in natural disarray, because of how they exist. When if we go back in time, far enough to recorded history, the idea of the chaste or sexually untouched religious person, even within the Catholic faith, it's not that terribly ancient. I mean, there was a time when things were done differently, and you're not considered any less of an adherent for it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I quite like that, is in kind of harking back to the Vivek poem, even in terms of Samhain in Aberystwyth, this kind of pagan element, thinking about the pre-Christian, pre-Catholic. There's a couple more comments, and then, because I'm aware of time, and I don't want to, also, you must be getting really hot, Shivani, and I'd want you to be cool. But I'll just mention that I was thinking, again, through this poem, there was a couple of other links that I'd kind of made with your work. Otherwise, I was kind of seeing this kind of sexual liaison between the two students as another form of your kind of Vivek's birth, like rebirthing. And I was thinking about them in terms of, you've said before, in terms of haunting, that there is the woman at the center of haunting, as you mentioned earlier, who is its dread, unfuckwithable talisman. I kind of see the birth of that woman maybe in these poems or in this poem. Kind of their connection, because maybe I guess there's like a love, their loving connection. They're young and they will become woman. You know what I mean? In that way. And also from the essay that you did for the Brave New World edited collection, the good girl, the good brown girl questioning obedience in Indo-Caribbean women. I found that section in this where you talk about at the end, I'll wait for you. Can you be a good girl, sweet girl? Can you be good? Kind of an inversion of those things, similar to what we were talking about with faggots and festivals, of kind of making it sexually charged, taking that idea of, no, I don't need to be a good girl, but are you the good girl? You know what I mean? And I wondered whether that kind of had some inspiration through that as well, or
it's I think I needed to come quite a long way within myself to feel comfortable, to feel fully comfortable about writing sapphic desire between two women in any sort of configuration in which women exist. And it wasn't that I was hiding behind gay men, though I certainly interrogated myself intensely about if I was I writing about men like Vivek because it was easier to do that. It absolutely was never easier. And I thought very carefully about how I was speaking and whether or not I was trying to speak for gay men, which I never wanted to do, never presumed that I could or should. But the parts that felt incredibly trustworthy, or that if Vivek was a part of me, then I had a right to speak about him. And that balance made sense to me. And with writing lesbian desire, it felt almost like your eyes watering if you stare at yourself in the mirror too hard. Like you, almost like you're trying to convince yourself that what you see is worthy of report. That's and it there are poems that experience through which one experiences sapphic desire and haunting. They're in there, but this poem and the newer work is really not trying to evade the gaze, whereas I think the ones in haunting kind of try to take it on a bit of a slant, or cradle it in a kind of mythology, which doesn't make them less. It just makes them the place I could write them from at the time.
Absolutely, and that kind of a scant space. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. So these two students, I mean, I'm pretty sure. I think this is the first time I've read this poem out loud. I think so. Yes. So it feels very special.
Thank you. I feel very special.
And it's also a space from which you cannot escape. It's going to invite questions. It's going to that line of "Is this you? Are you one of these girls? Did you finger fuck somebody in the chapel?" And I mean, answers to that could go anywhere and take a lot of forms. I think what would be a truer response is that the way in which these girls love each other and reach for each other is what I had hoped for as a young person in desire. And maybe I did get it, in certain ways, within and without the school setting. But it's that pressure of knowing womanhood is supposed to look a certain way. An accomplished young woman who goes to the right schools in the right places and speaks the right foreign languages and does all the right extracurriculars should exist in a certain kind of body size, length of hair, style of nails, and it's extremely codified. And I thought, what if a young woman is all those things by choice, but also loves women. Like, how does she reconcile these pockets of herself that are dutiful, obedient, maybe religious, and also transgressive and mischievous and playful? How do we ask any young person to do this without kind of imploding on themselves? And why do we have so many profoundly unhappy young people suffering through school? It seems pretty obvious. It's because they are trying to be a million people at once to please usually everyone but themselves. I wanted a space to sit with that, to reflect on how it was true of me at a certain point in my life, how I know it is true for young people now, and I wish it didn't have to be that way. And I hate that suggestion that it must get better. You know, like the it gets better campaign.
Oh yeah, campaign, yeah.
I understand the use of it, but I don't think it's safe to tell children that it does, because it really doesn't for everyone.
No.
There's no guarantee that you can tell someone that and it's going to be true. I would say that it can, and I hope it does. And I really hope it does, but that you have to be instrumental somehow in that. You have to stay. Like, you have to decide to stay in the world. No, you can't. You can't check out even in your head for like indefinitely.
No. And it's the idea, I suppose. Sorry, Karen.
No, go ahead.
No, it was more like the idea that all of a sudden loving yourself is just going to happen. You know, there's kind of that RuPaulification of love yourself, where it's like, you know, and it's great sentiment. It's good to repeat it. If you can't, you have to love yourself. If you can't love anybody else, how are you going to love anybody else, etc.
Yeah.
But that loving yourself is painful, and it just made me think of. I just got like a Bell Hooks quote all about love, new visions. Which I thought I'd bring now, where she says, or she said, of course, because she passed away recently, R.I.P. The practice of love offers no place of safety. We risk loss, hurt, pain. We risk being acted upon by forces outside our control. And I think that's the bit, isn't it? It's like, it's still going to hurt. Sorry. Yeah.
It is, but it's, you know, but it can be worth it. It can be worth kind of like what Vivek is coming to his own realization about. And I suppose in a way, you know, the protagonist of Firefly, that love is entirely possible. Maybe almost always all the time, but it will cost something. And it's not even that the cost is fair. It's not that you should pay it, because it's often just fucked up. It's often terribly unfair to you as a person. You know, often you are carrying the weight of someone else's cyclical pain on your shoulders, which you should never have to do. But if you decide that it's worth it to love yourself or someone else, then it can be possible. Then you can prove to yourself, most of all, that you are a deeply worthy being. You know, no matter how you're configured, no matter if you love women, you love men, you love people in between, you love strangely or recklessly, like you love intemperately. It's all, there's room for you. Like, there's room for you to belong and to be.
And that's beautiful. And also very hopeful. Look, you said you weren't very hopeful, but there's hope there. That's good hope. And also it's a really nice way to kind of move towards questions. Because I know I've got one that I can see in the chat at the minute. Otherwise it says mute. So I'll just, and this is the question, it includes kind of love and self-love. Are you happy for questions now? I didn't even ask, I just kind of rolled right through. Of course. So question from Ames Rushton, whose pronouns are they, them. My question isn't particularly lit pretty, but it is relevant to the theme of love. When writing, performing, and revisiting painful, traumatic themes and experiences, how do you show your self-love? Or, in fact, is the very writing, performing, and revisiting of those experiences an act of love? And they also say that everyone knows I'm haunting their favourite collection of the last decade.
Thank you. Very lovely. I think that's a very important question. And if I'm honest, it was not something I started thinking about till relatively recently. I think I used to believe that just to suffer was noble, and the output of that suffering would be the worth of what you've done. So I thought, okay, I've written this book, and it contains things that have been immensely hard to hold, but it's out there because I did it. And now I don't have to worry about certain repercussions. But that was incredibly not true. In fact, I think the work, being in the world, if anything, made me confront the ways in which I so poorly dealt with the repercussions of making difficult work, that it was almost more painful post-publication. And so what I've done about that is to first accept that, because initially it felt like a great weakness that I couldn't admit it to myself. And I thought, this goes against everything you've taught yourself or been taught about being stoic, about being a badass, about being... But you know what? More than that, about being someone that someone else could harm. Because I figured if I don't show any weakness, no one can sort of penetrate my armor worse than it already has been. It's like when you get terribly hurt by someone else, you think, oh, I let my guard down somehow. Like somehow I did something, and now I can kind of go back and re-barricade. So unlearning all of that has been a real process. And I won't say that I'm all the way there, but I will say that when I come to creative work, particularly poetry, and now essays, an important question I ask myself beginning is, am I really resisting the urge to fetishize my past pain for someone else's appetite? Even if I know that this poem will sell, or be interesting or exciting, or this essay will make people think, wow, she really put it all out there. If I'm doing it for the wrong reasons, I now feel it in my body. And I allow myself to feel it. And I take a step back and I think, why am I telling this story? Why am I presenting this part of myself in this way? Is there a better way to do this? Or is there a different time to do this? And that's been a pretty critical step. And the other important thing I think I've done around dealing with traumatic work is to have someone I care about very much on a kind of standby. Now that kind of implies a really close relationship with a person, and I'm very careful when I do that not to put pressure on whoever that individual is. So it's often looks like a check-in more than anything else. And really what it usually is the refusal to lie to someone when they ask you about your process. And this might not be true for everyone you have a relationship with. It probably won't or shouldn't be, but if there is, that person or a person who you both trust and who accepts the responsibility of a certain kind of care and cares for themselves in that process, then it's important not to lie to them, because it is a bit like lying to a piece of you. And that also helps.
Yeah, there's a lot that I suppose it's kind of that what we were talking about throughout. There's kind of these intersections of love in terms of self and other, and that there's always a difficulty to that, and that taking care of yourself, self-love isn't easy in terms of just caring, consent, and no one has to be kind of shamed around that. I think there tends to be quite a lot of rhetoric of like, oh, you've let yourself burn out, or instead of the world having potentially demanded too much. If there's any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Anything, either to me or Shivani, so we've got a few minutes. But don't worry if there's been so much beautiful content, Shivani. I'm all like, there's lots of fire emojis and stuff in the chat. We can't see the chat, so, but they're happy. Have you been happy with this whole process, Shivani?
Of course. I mean, it's been beautiful. It's also beautiful, Tom, to know that, you create work and often don't think too much about what will happen to it when it's out there, or that it even will be out there. And to know that people like you desire that level of engagement, that's also engagement within our community, is deeply meaningful. I mean, it's meaningful to be read in almost every circumstance, but to know that your own people are reading you and seeking to be with you and in community with you is profoundly humbling. And I'm very grateful to you for enabling this space. It is absolutely a space of love.
And I'm grateful to you, because I think even the conversations that we've had through, it's been healing. I mean, I know I've talked to you that I've been kind of reading and writing with your chapter, with your book in my chapter, in what I'm writing at the moment. And so it's been a lot of time with your work, but it's been amazing to kind of share that back and forth with you as well. And I'm just very thankful for this opportunity altogether. And I'm just seeing that, you know what it looks like? The thing is, oh, there we go. What is the connection between the two of you? Tom, what drew you to Shivanee's work? I'm writing in my PhD thesis at the moment. I'm writing a chapter on Shivanee's Everyone Knows I'm a Haunting and Stacey Ann Chin's Other Side of Paradise. I was also reading through kind of Zami and biomythography, which are all kind of things that I don't need to unpack here because it's just me talking about my stuff. But I got in touch with Shivani it was the end of last year, and then we've been having kind of it's been really lovely, like weekly meetings for a while now, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been really lovely. And to make these connections with people also in the middle of a pandemic is it's a great distraction from all of the unbearable sadness that I find is around us. Distraction might not be the word, it's a reminder of what connects us.
I think being drawn. Sorry, carry on. I jumped in because I was like, I didn't answer the other bit.
Yeah, and to be examined alongside someone like Stacey Ann Chin is a great honor. I mean, Stacey Ann is the kind of poet I found myself reaching for as I grew into my awareness of myself as a queer poet. What fascinated me about her poetics was that she had come from a very, and she's open about this, violent sort of escape from Jamaica, from a society in which her queerness had been so policed and so under threat that she had to flee to express herself, similar to the way in which the Jamaican novelist Marlon James talks about leaving Jamaica to write more fully. And Stacey Ann, in her presentation of herself and her work, always seemed profoundly fearless, which of course meant that she wasn't fearless at all, that the work had to carry this toll of incredible fear, but she was doing it anyway. Actually, right here, her book, which collects quite a lot of her poetry, and I thought the queer self, the queer Caribbean self, has always had to navigate certain kinds of brutality long before we existed with the terminology queer in these islands, long before a single textbook was written on queer theory. There have been queer people here for forever, since the first people put their feet on these islands. And how have we navigated the difficulty of a queer life? I think through the example of Stacey Ann's poetry is that you cannot evade it, but it also doesn't have to be the summation of what your existence is. That queer joy is possible almost every day. Queer freedom, queer sensuality. I mean, even if you have to fight and bargain and barter for those moments. It's there somewhere. Even if like Stacey and you have to flee to find them, you will still be Caribbean, no matter where you are in the world, and you will still be queer.
That's similar to what you were. Yeah, that's really similar because it's similar to what you were saying about being queer. Like, no matter what you do, you're queer while you're doing it. So no matter what you do or write, you're Caribbean in that same way. And it's interesting between your, because what you were talking about earlier in terms of, and maybe throughout the evening of people really wanting to know, did this happen? Is this biography?
Yeah.
That's because with Other Side of Paradise, which is Stacey Ann's memoir from 2009, because it is a memoir, it's also very much, did this happen? How did this happen? But it doesn't have to be like that. The way that I've read, or from my interpretation of you both, it's almost like those bits that are inside you that you've birthed, like Vivek, which I've seen. And these is just my reading. Every critic can disagree with me in all sorts of different ways. And but also, there's like a blueprint. You're kind of writing a queer blueprint for survival in a way. So how you would survive this thing, even though you already have, and that's about love. There is some love that has to be on many levels that has to be working there. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. There's a big love. Yeah. So if there aren't any more questions coming through, we'll just see from the typing. But this, I just wanted to say thank you again, Shivani, anyway, for all your engagement. And just a really beautiful, thank you for being so generous, both with your time and with your readings. What's next? What's next for you is the last question that comes through. I was saying things that I really meant and I loved, but I was also waiting for typing to finish. I was like, what? Yeah. So what's next for you? Is a question from the chat, Shivani.
Well, in the immediate future, I'm going to like lay on the floor like a starfish and be so grateful for this sharing.
Yeah.
But in the more extended future of the year, I hope to finish my collection of essays, which is called Unkillable, which you mentioned. Unkillable was supposed to be published this year, but as some of you may know, I spent quite a bit of last year being quite ill. And so publication has been deferred to 2023. And those essays are about a lot of the same things I write about in my poems, and specifically about what being obedient looks like in Indo-Caribbean women, from which I'm drawing directly on my own family line. So my two grandmothers, one of whom is alive, one of whom passed several years ago, my mother and myself. What makes a woman good, what makes a woman pure, and how women in and out of tradition have been defying that in the Caribbean for always.
Amazing. Sounds. I can't wait, and it's really amazing to hear that. I didn't realize there would be that kind of generational, kind of matrilineal thing coming, kind of aspect coming through. That's really beautiful. And what's next for me? More thesis writing, but also more time, more time with Shivani's work, which is a privilege. This chapter has been such a privilege. I mean, I know I keep going on about it, and you're probably sick of hearing it, but it has been a real privilege to work with, to have this during the time of your work, and just to have this space, and somehow magically, it, connection has worked. We did that. That's good.
Not even a nationwide power outage could keep you from me or me from you.
No, and it
or
won't.
Us who are looking, and I'm very grateful for that.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to say thank you. So, Shivani, there'll be more if you want to subscribe to Shivani's Substack newsletter, which is amazing, and I really love engaging with. It comes into that'll be in the chat again, and all social media kind of info. I don't know if there's anything else that'll come through the chat, but I just wanted to say thank you to Bonington and the Postcolonial Studies Centre as well for facilitating all this, and to you and to Alex, who's been behind the scenes and been really great during this whole thing. And yeah, just thank you again for that. And this won't be like, I'm looking forward to seeing you again really soon anyway, and I'm glad I hope this has been the space that you wanted it to be, and I'm really appreciative for it.
Oh, it's been so much more than that. It's been really lovely. Thank you, everyone who's made this possible. And thank you for all being magnificently queer if you are, and for being magnificently supportive allies if you're not.
Absolutely. Beautiful way to end it. Thank you. Love to all in all those ways. And I will leave Shivani, yes, absolutely. Go and get in a cold shower or something. That's what you need. Maybe I need a cold shower now as well. It's very exciting. But thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone.